Freak shows didn't just appear in the 80s. They'd been brewing for centuries. By the 60s, people with extreme deformities were already being paraded in public for profit, mostly because no one else would hire them. Some, like the Elephant Man, never really had a choice. Then in the early 19th century, the word freak turned into a full-blown brand, and guys like Barnum knew exactly how to milk it. He sold dreams of fame and fortune, but what he really sold was shock value. In this video, we're going to look at some of the most disturbing circus freaks that really existed. Number 15. The Pig-Faced Lady. Freak shows didn't just find people, they made them up when business demanded it. One of the strangest examples was the Pig-Faced Lady. This hoax captivated England across 2 centuries. The rumor was senseless. They said she's a noblewoman who was born with the face of a pig. By winter 1814-15, London tabloids were printing eyewitness letters claiming she lived in seclusion, refused mirrors, and ate from a silver trough. And the story snowballed. Traveling shows and small circuses began advertising their own pig-faced women. Well, not real, of course, just costumes and illusion. One fair in the 1850s even shaved a drunken bear, stuffed it into a dress, and charged for entry. People believed it. The myth worked because the public wanted it to. There was never any real woman behind the curtain, just a society willing to accept anything that fit the story they already wanted to see. The pig-faced lady, like the Burnham's unicorn or 8-legged horse, was never real. But anyway, the hunger for her was. Number 14. Bill Dirks. Bill was known as the man with 3 eyes, or the man with 2 faces. He was born in 1913 to ordinary parents and lived with severe facial clefts that made it appear as if he had 2 overlapping faces. The 3rd eye seen in his posters was actually painted on by promoters to exaggerate his look for audiences. He joined sideshows in his 40s and quickly became a highlight attraction. Life on the road wasn't glamorous, but it offered him something rare: a living. He later met and married Mildred Dirks, known as the alligator-skinned lady, who had ichthyosis. Together, they were promoted as the world's strangest couple. Behind the banners, though, Bill was quiet, kind, and deeply loyal to his wife. He'd endured years of isolation before the circus gave him community. People stared at his face, but his story was always in his eyes. Tired, gentle, and endlessly forgiving toward a world that never looked back with kindness. Number 13. Robert Huddleston. Robert L. Huddleston, nicknamed Pony Boy, walked on all 4s his entire life. Born in 1895, he had an undiagnosed bone disorder that made upright walking impossible, but it never stopped him. He hunted, milked cows, and hiked 15 miles a day using his hands and feet. When he joined the circus, he didn't go as a victim. He went as a performer. For 36 years, he toured under the spotlight, showing audiences how adaptation could look almost graceful. He wasn't ashamed of his posture. He often said, "I feel just as healthy walking on 4 as others do on 2. Sometimes he wore small wooden blocks on his hands and shoes to create a rhythmic clomping sound, giving his act a unique beat. He proved something simple but profound, that normal is only a word. Behind the stage makeup and applause was a man who didn't see disability. He saw a different way of moving through life, and he owned every step. Number 12. Topsy the Elephant. Well, first of all, Topsy wasn't just an elephant. She became a symbol of how low humans will sink when cruelty gets disguised as entertainment. For years, she was dragged through American circuses, beaten, starved, and forced to perform. In 1903, after enduring countless abuses, she killed a drunken handler who tried to feed her a lit cigar. That gave Luna Park all the reason they needed. Rather than putting her down quietly, They staged her death as public theater. 1,500 people showed up to watch her get fed carrots laced with cyanide, then electrocuted, and Thomas Edison's crew filmed it. That grainy film, electrocuting an elephant, still circulates, sold as history. But it's not just history. It's a filmed execution, a real one. People stood and watched. Cameras captured the whole thing. Topsy died not for justice, but for spectacle. Her death wasn't just documented, it was sold. And the guilt baked into those frames doesn't fade with time. It still stings. It was a cruelty. Number 11. Arty Atherton. Arty Atherton, born Charles Arthur Maule in 1890, was the frail boy who refused to vanish. Weighing just 2 pounds at birth, he spent years carried on a pillow. By his teens, he'd found mobility through crutches, not pity. He joined Barnum and Bailey in 1909 as the Skeleton Dude, a living contrast act beside strongmen and giants. Standing tall in elegance despite his 38-pound frame, Arty became a headliner across America. Offstage, he worked as a reporter and lived an ordinary love story, marrying Mary Blanche Berkeley, a snake charmer known as Jelly May. Their odd pairing drew crowds, but their marriage was real. They had 2 healthy children, defying the cruel eugenic beliefs of the era. Arty's humor, discipline, and charm made him beloved among his peers. In 1920, he was struck by a car and died at just 31. Newspapers mourned him as the Skeleton Dude, but friends remembered the man who never let his size define his worth. He was a man and a human. Number 10. The double-bodied man. Jean Libera was born with something no one could ignore, another body attached to his. A parasitic twin, later named Jacques, grew from Jean's abdomen and chest. It didn't speak, but it moved. X-rays showed a skull, about 6 inches wide, buried inside Jean's torso. This wasn't a costume or trick, it was a second self. Jean toured as the double-bodied man, drawing stares from audiences who couldn't look away. But Jean didn't just perform. He lived. He married, raised 4 healthy children, and eventually stepped away from the spotlight. Unlike many others, he got out. Doctors studied him for years, fascinated by how much life that second form retained. Crowds paid to see the twin, but what they really saw, if they looked closely, was a man who carried another life without apology. Jean didn't hide or beg for sympathy. He simply shared space with someone who'd never lived alone. That wasn't a sideshow. It was survival in the shape of a human being. Number 9. Leonard Trask. Leonard Trask's story isn't about fame. It's about endurance. Born in 1805 in Maine, his life turned after a freak accident. Thrown from his horse in his 20s, he crawled home over several days, unaware his spine was slowly fusing. Over the years, his neck bent forward until his chin pressed permanently into his chest. Still, he worked, farmed, and raised 7 children with his wife's help. But pain never stopped deepening. Between 1840 and 1858, he suffered several more serious injuries, each worsening his condition. Unable to work, he began sharing his story to survive. He published a short autobiography in 1860 titled The Wonderful Invalid, describing his daily struggles with a mix of humor and quiet sadness. Crowds paid small coins to see him, not realizing they were funding his survival. He died in 1861, undiagnosed. Today, doctors believe he had ankylosing spondylitis, a rare spinal disorder. Leonard didn't chase attention. He turned suffering into livelihood, with dignity still intact. Number 8. Duke the Rodeo Horse. Duke was a 9-year-old rodeo horse who collapsed and died in front of a cheering crowd at Cowtown Rodeo in New Jersey. Promoters called it an accident, a rare aortic rupture, but animal rights group SHARK had cameras rolling. Their footage showed a handler jabbing Duke with an illegal electric prod right before the gate opened. Moments later, the horse collapsed. The Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association bans hot shots during performance, but enforcement is paper-thin. Nobody was fined. No one was blamed. Duke's body was hauled away like broken gear, and the show went on. Rodeos love calling their tradition proud, but this one turned ugly. Duke didn't buck for fun or flair. He bucked because he was shocked. Then he dropped, mid-run, with the crowd still yelling. For the audience, it was a pause. For Duke, it was the end. There was no memorial, no investigation, just the quiet disappearance of an animal used up and thrown away. Number 7. Felix Verley. Felix didn't need makeup tricks or props. His skin was the act. Known as the elastic skin man, he could stretch his neck skin down to his chest and bend his fingers all the way back without flinching. Audiences gasped, but it wasn't a gimmick. Felix had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, a rare connective tissue disorder that makes skin unnaturally stretchy and joints hyperflexible. At a time when medical conditions were turned into ticket sales, Felix became a top attraction at Barnum and Bailey shows. His talent wasn't just shocking, it was real, and it was his. He could pull the skin on his face like rubber, twist his arms in impossible directions, and walk away unbothered. But backstage, he lived a quiet life. No outrageous persona, no backstory invented by promoters. Just a man whose body moved differently. Audiences came to see something freakish. What they got was something biological, unexplained, rare, and unforgettable. Felix didn't pretend to be something else. He just was. Number 6. The Dionne quintuplets. In 1934, Elzire Dionne gave birth to 5 identical girls, Annette, Emily, Yvonne, Cécile, and Marie, in Ontario. They weighed less than 14 pounds combined. Doctors called them a miracle. The government called them an attraction. Within months, Ontario took custody and built a tourist compound called Quintland, directly across from their parents' home. Behind glass, several times a day, the girls were displayed like museum pieces, studied, photographed, and branded. For 9 years, they were a national sensation. 3 million people came to see them. Their faces were printed on everything from soap to cereal boxes. But none of that money reached them. When they were finally returned to their parents, they walked into a house full of resentment and abuse. Emily died first. Marie followed. Only Annette and Cécile remain. They later called their childhood a human zoo. People loved their matching dresses and scripted smiles, but they never heard the sisters' voices over the noise of souvenirs selling out. Number 5. Consul the Great. He was never just one chimpanzee. He was a rotating cast, a marketing scheme, a brand dressed in little suits. The first consul appeared in Manchester in 1893, smoking pipes and pretending to attend board meetings. When he died a year later, promoters simply replaced him. The act lived on, chimps skating, sewing, eating off fine china, all while dressed like gentlemen. By 1909, 2 rival theaters in the U.S. each claimed to have the real consul. But the public didn't care. They just wanted to see a monkey act like a man. Even after later consuls died, new ones kept showing up, now renamed Consul Peter or Consuline. No one told the audience. They didn't ask. It wasn't about the animal. It was about the illusion. The suits stayed crisp, the names recycled, and the story never stopped. Behind the bow tie was a wild creature, taught to mimic human life. But none of it was real. Number 4. Samuel Parks. Samuel Parks, better known as Hop the Frog Boy, had limbs so twisted they barely functioned. Born in 1874 in Boston, his arms and legs were curled beneath him, forcing him into a crouched position that resembled a frog. That's all promoters needed. He was booked for the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition and became a regular sideshow attraction. But Samuel wasn't alone. In 1910, he married Helen Parks, stage name Princess Wee Wee, a little person also working the circus circuit. The two were advertised as a freak show love story. Behind the banners, they built a marriage around humor, resilience, and survival. Samuel never walked upright, but he performed, traveled, and refused to disappear. He died in 1923 from pneumonia at age 49. Yet those who saw him remembered one thing. He didn't leap, he didn't croak, but he lived like a man determined not to be reduced to a nickname. Number 3. Jackie Sellers. Jackie Sellers performed under the name Mondu, the half-man, half-woman, and lived a life split between biology and spectacle. Jackie was intersex, with one side of the body presenting entirely male and the other entirely female. This wasn't drag or disguise, it was anatomy. Sideshow promoters leaned into the split, printing posters that flaunted Mondu's difference and letting curious crowds gawk. Jackie didn't perform tricks. He stood still. He was the act. But he never allowed photos of his feminine side. No records survive of where Jackie was born or buried. Just a handful of fragments, a stage name, a couple of show flyers, and vague references from carnival programs. The rest is lost. In a world obsessed with labels, Jackie didn't offer one. He lived in between, and while most came to stare at his body, few looked close enough to see the person inside. Jackie wasn't trying to shock anyone. He was just existing, whole, complicated, and unapologetically himself in a weird world. Number 2. The Elephant Man. Joseph Merrick didn't choose the nickname Elephant Man. The world gave it to him, loud, cruel, and constant. Born in Leicester in 1862, his body started distorting early. Bones grew wrong, skin bunched and sagged. By age 12, there was no hiding it. He ended up in a sideshow because nothing else existed for someone like him. His head was so massive he had to sleep sitting up. Behind the deformities was a gentle, educated man. But most didn't care. They came to count his tumors. When his manager abandoned him in Belgium, he crawled back to London, beaten and broke. The London hospital took him in, not as an exhibit, but as a human being. He read books, made friends, and even met royalty. Princess Alexandra visited him. In 1890, he died in his sleep. The weight of his skull crushed his windpipe. Not a disease, just gravity. And that's how the world broke Joseph Merrick, slowly, in plain view, while pretending it cared. Number 1. Lazarus and Joannes Baptista, Colorado. Freakshows didn't invent conjoined twins, but they did turn them into something else. Born in the early 1600s, Lazarus and Joannes Baptista, Colorado were physically joined at the torso. Lazarus lived a full life. He could walk, speak, work, and even have children. Joannes couldn't. His body was underdeveloped, silent, and always there, hanging motionless from Lazarus's chest. Most of the time, Lazarus kept him hidden under a cloak. On stage, he revealed himself only when the crowd demanded it. The brothers toured across Europe, performing before nobles and even King Charles I. But their most infamous story came off stage. A man insulted them in the street, and Lazarus struck back, killing him. The court considered execution until they realized it would also kill Joannes. For the first time, the silent brother had a voice, not in words but in consequence. Their bond wasn't just biological, it was legal, moral, and unbreakable in ways no one else fully understood. They lived together, and nearly died the same way. If you've enjoyed watching this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for hanging with us, and we'll see you very soon.